Did you know the very first moment of your day can shape the entire course of your life? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Rise and do what you were made to do." The way you respond to your alarm, it's not just a habit. It's a mirror. It reveals whether you're led by discipline or by indulgence. Waking up at 5 a.m. isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. While the world sleeps, you've already begun. You've claimed a part of the day untouched by noise, by pressure, by expectation. It's your time to think clearly, to journal, to meditate, to reconnect with yourself before the world tries to define you. And if you want to lead, you don't start when everyone else does. 1. Discipline begins the moment your alarm rings. Picture this. The very first moment of your day. The world is still quiet. No emails. No demands. No noise. Just you and the sound of your alarm going off. That moment, seemingly small, is actually one of the most defining decisions you'll make all day. Do you get up, or do you hit snooze? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He didn't say, "Lay there for 10 more minutes." He didn't say, "Rest a little more, you've earned it." Because he knew every act of delay is a seed of surrender. Your response to that alarm is a mirror. It reflects the raw, unfiltered truth about you. Not your intentions. Not your dreams. But your willpower, your grit, your standard. You can talk all day about becoming successful, getting in shape, starting that business, mastering your life. But if you can't defeat the voice that says just 5 more minutes, then all of it, the goals, the vision boards, the motivation, is just noise. The cold truth? A man who can't control his morning will never control his life. You might think hitting snooze is harmless. It's just 10 minutes. But while you delay, someone else is already up, training, reading, planning, building, becoming sharper, stronger, and more dangerous. You didn't just lose 10 minutes. You gave away the steering wheel of your life to comfort. Now imagine this instead. You wake up at 5 a.m. You rise without hesitation. You open your journal and pour out thoughts that have been waiting for clarity. You train your body, breathe deeply, and feel a current of energy run through you. You face the day before the world even wakes up. That isn't just a morning. That's a statement. That's a silent vow that you are no longer at the mercy of your feelings. Because the man who gets out of bed at 5 a.m., when nobody's watching, when nobody's rewarding him, when there's zero applause, that man lives by an internal code. And that kind of man is unbeatable. If something inside of you is stirring right now, don't ignore it. Hit subscribe, not because this was a cool video, but because you just realized that true freedom begins with winning the first battle of the day, the one against yourself. 2. The early morning, a territory still untouched by the world. If getting out of bed is the first test of your discipline, then what comes next is the true reward, freedom. And not the kind of freedom you've been sold. Not money. Not status. Not even time. But a deeper kind, the kind that few men ever taste, the freedom to truly own yourself. You see, 5 a.m. isn't just a time on the clock. It's a sacred hour. It's the last untouched territory of your day, a silent kingdom before the world storms the gates with notifications, deadlines, expectations, and noise. At 5 a.m., no one is calling you. No one is emailing you. No one needs anything from you. And for that short, golden stretch of time, you're alone with your thoughts. Your real thoughts. The kind that don't come when your phone is buzzing, when your boss is speaking, when your schedule is screaming for attention. This is where Stoics found their power. Not on battlefields, but in the stillness before the world woke up. They knew what modern men have forgotten. Clarity doesn't come from chaos, it comes from quiet. If you've ever felt like you're constantly reacting to life instead of living it, there's a reason for that. Most men don't own their time, they borrow it, rent it, give it away. They wake up into stress, into urgency, into a world that's already pulling at them before their feet hit the floor. But a man who rises early isn't reacting. He's creating. He's crafting the tempo of his day, not surrendering to it. He starts from stillness. He meets himself first. And from there, he chooses who he wants to be that day. That's power. And the most extraordinary thing? It's right there. Waiting for you. Every single morning. The world will always be loud. But it will always be quiet at 5 a.m. That hour doesn't belong to anyone unless you claim it. So now, the real question isn't, can I wake up earlier? It's, how long will I keep giving the best part of my day to a world that doesn't give a damn about my peace, my growth, or my purpose? The moment you take back your mornings, you begin to take back your identity. You become the man who is unshaken by external noise because he's grounded in inner clarity. You don't check your phone first thing. You check in with your soul, with your body, with your mission. That's not routine. That's a ritual. A sacred initiation into the man you were meant to be. And it starts when the world is still sleeping. So if you're tired of living someone else's schedule, if you're done waking up already behind, then don't just change your alarm. Change your standard. Subscribe now, not for tips, not for hacks, but for the reminder that your life is waiting to be claimed in the hour before the world wakes up. 3. The mind is sharpest before the world invades. Once you begin to claim your mornings, once you've tasted the stillness of 5 a.m., something unexpected happens. You begin to hear things you've never heard before. Not from the outside world, but from within. Thoughts once muffled by noise start to rise. Truths you've ignored begin to knock. And beneath the layers of distraction, pressure, and performance, you find something rare in today's world. Mental clarity. Because here's what most men don't realize. Your mind isn't just awake in the early morning. It's at its purest. Untouched. Uninfluenced. Undistracted. It hasn't been shaped yet by headlines, arguments, opinions, or noise. You are still yourself. And that version of you, the one who exists before caffeine, before emails, before problems, that's the version you should be building from. That's the foundation of strength, awareness, and intention. This is why the Stoics guarded their mornings like sacred ground. To them, the morning wasn't just a time slot. It was a mental battlefield, and the enemy wasn't the world. It was the self that forgets who he is. So they wrote. They reflected. They trained not just their bodies, but their principles. They didn't seek productivity, they sought alignment. Marcus Aurelius didn't start his day scrolling. He started it with the Meditations, a journal that wasn't meant for the world, only for himself. Seneca didn't wake to chaos, he walked slowly through ideas and questions about life, mortality, justice, and action. They understood that when the mind is clear, action becomes aligned. And when action is aligned, your days stop feeling random. You stop asking, what am I even doing with my life? Because everything, every small act, every step, comes from a place of inner knowing. But let's speak plainly here. That clarity doesn't show up by accident. You don't stumble into self-awareness while checking your phone in bed. You have to make space for it. You have to fight for it. And the best time to do that, the most sacred window you have, is before the world wakes up. That's when your thoughts are raw, before they've been shaped by the opinions of others. That's when you can ask yourself the hard questions. Who am I becoming? What am I running from? What do I believe in when no one is watching? It's not easy to face those questions. It's not easy to sit in silence when the world teaches you to constantly chase noise. But every man who has ever led a meaningful life has done exactly that. Because clarity isn't a gift. It's the reward for choosing the path of depth over distraction. It's what you find in the cold quiet of early morning, when the only thing louder than the silence is your own truth. So now the question becomes, Will you keep starting your day in chaos, feeding on junk information, running on fumes? Or will you rise before the world, sit with yourself, and begin the day as a man who knows where he stands? Because a man who finds clarity in the morning carries that power with him all day. And in a world of distracted men, that clarity is a weapon. Do not let another morning slip away. Do not wait for motivation. Do not wait for the perfect routine or schedule or plan. Start with 5 minutes of silence. Start with a blank page. Start with one deep breath at 5 a.m. and build your life from there. Subscribe, not because this video inspired you, but because this version of you, the one you meet in the silence, is the version that can change everything. For waking early won't make you successful, but it will strip away your excuses. So now you've heard the truth. Discipline begins the moment your alarm rings. Mornings are sacred because they are untouched by the world. And in that silence, you find the version of yourself most worth becoming. But let's be honest. Waking up at 5 a.m. in itself won't make you rich. It won't make you famous. It won't guarantee success. That's a myth sold to people looking for magic. Because waking up early is not the key to success. It's something much more rare and far more dangerous to your old self. It's the death of your excuses. When you wake up early, really early, before the world has laid its hands on you, you're left alone with yourself. And there's nowhere left to hide. You can't blame your boss. You can't say, "I didn't have time." You can't say, "I'll start when things calm down." There's only time, and how you use it. And when you're standing there, in the silence of morning, no notifications, no demands, no noise, you're face to face with one question that most men avoid for decades. What's stopping me? And the answer? Usually, it's you. Your patterns. Your habits. Your addictions to comfort, to ease, to entertainment. Your addiction to later. This is the quiet horror of early mornings. They confront you with your own potential and the brutal realization of how long you've been avoiding it. Most men don't want to hear this. They want hacks. They want morning routines with step-by-step checklists. They want to look disciplined without being disciplined. But waking up early doesn't make you disciplined. Showing up in that early silence does. Facing the boredom. Facing the discomfort. Facing the mirror. That's where the inner transformation happens. And once you begin doing this, not just once, not for a week, but again and again, you start to feel a shift. A kind of quiet pride. You're not doing this for Instagram. You're not doing this to be part of a trend. You're doing it because there's a deeper voice inside you that says, "I'm not going to keep living like this." That voice gets louder in the dark hours of the morning. And if you listen long enough, you start to act. You write. You train. You build. You face things you've buried. You no longer let busy be your excuse. You no longer say, "I'm tired," as if that justifies a wasted day. Because you understand something that most people never will. Waking up early doesn't make you better than anyone. But it makes it impossible to keep lying to yourself. That's where real strength begins. That's where purpose is born. Not in feeling motivated, but in facing yourself every morning before the world even begins. This is what separates the men who live with intention from the ones who float through life making excuses. So if you're tired of your own excuses, if you're done being at the mercy of life's chaos, then take the first step. It's not glamorous. It's not loud. It's not even comfortable. But it's real. Start tomorrow. Start earlier. Sit in the silence. And ask the hard questions. Then ask again the next morning. And the next. Not because it's a trend. Not because it's cool. But because you're done being a stranger to your own potential. Subscribe, not to follow another voice, but to finally start listening to your own. Would you like me to continue into CTA 5, where we pivot from removing excuses to the deeper concept of living proactively rather than reactively? 5. You either lead the day, or you chase it. Once you strip away the excuses, once you stand in that early morning silence with nothing to blame, what happens next is where everything begins to change. Because when you remove all the noise, all the reasons, all the mental clutter, you realize just how long you've been living on autopilot, running from one thing to the next, answering, reacting, responding. Life becomes a series of what's next, but rarely what matters. That's the hidden danger of waking up late, not the time itself, but the pattern it creates. You don't just start your day behind on time. You start behind on your own authority. From the moment your feet hit the floor, you're catching up. Your energy doesn't belong to you. It's already been assigned to obligations, distractions, noise. And when you live like this long enough, something tragic happens. You stop being the author of your life. You become a responder to it. You don't decide what the day will be. You react to what the day demands. But this is not how you were meant to live. Seneca once said, "No man can call himself free if he does not own the beginning of his day." He wasn't being poetic. He was warning you. Because when the morning owns you, when it drags you out of bed, when it rushes you into traffic, when it blinds you with stress, you've already lost the day before it's even begun. But there is another way. A way where you are not the one being pulled, but the one who leads. And it begins not with some grand plan, but with a decision. To meet the morning before the world meets you. To decide what you believe before the headlines try to tell you. To shape your mind before someone else sells you theirs. To move your body before the fatigue convinces you to stay still. To remind yourself of who you are before the world convinces you to forget. When you do this, day after day, quietly, with discipline, you begin to notice something. The world doesn't feel as heavy. Stress doesn't have the same grip. Urgency doesn't seduce you like it used to. Because you are no longer reacting to the world. You are living by intention. This is the difference between being driven and being pushed. Between acting out of principle and acting out of panic. Most men never make that switch. They stay stuck in the loop, always catching up, always exhausted, always confused while life feels like it's slipping through their fingers. But the man who leads his morning doesn't chase anything. He moves deliberately. He speaks with clarity. He decides with conviction. And the world begins to respond to him. Not because he controls everything, he doesn't. But because he controls himself. That's what the early morning gives you. Not more hours in a day, but the anchor to hold your ground when everything around you pulls. So now you have a choice. Will you keep waking up into someone else's agenda? Or will you wake up with your own? Will you drift into the day already behind? Or will you rise with presence, with focus, with power? You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need another book. You don't need another quote. You need one thing. To decide that your life begins before the world gets a say. Subscribe, not because it's easy, not because it's popular, but because the first 10 minutes of your morning may be the only time you'll ever have the chance to be completely yourself. And that's where everything starts. 6. Rise before the sun, reset your mind, reclaim your nature. By now, you understand this is more than motivation. It's not about waking up early to feel productive. It's about reclaiming control over your day, your thoughts, your sense of self. And if you've come this far, it means something inside of you is already shifting. You're starting to sense it. This isn't just psychological, it's physiological. It's not just about clarity of thought. It's about restoring your biology to its natural rhythm. Because the modern man lives in contradiction. He stares into artificial light until midnight. He scrolls into silence, hoping for peace from noise. He drags himself out of bed after the sun has risen, wondering why he feels foggy, unmotivated, and emotionally distant. But it hasn't always been this way. There was a time, not that long ago, when we rose with the sun, worked with our hands, moved with the rhythm of the earth. When our internal clock, our circadian rhythm, was not a technical term in a textbook, but a living pulse we could feel in our bones. The Stoics, the warriors, the thinkers of ancient time. They didn't need science to explain why the early morning brought calm. They knew it. They felt it. When you wake before the sun, you're not just giving yourself more time. You're giving yourself something much more rare. Alignment. Because in that pre-dawn hour, your brain is functioning differently. Your dopamine levels are unpolluted. Your serotonin receptors haven't been numbed by 1,000 inputs. Your stress hormone, cortisol, is naturally elevated to help you rise and act. This is your body preparing you for battle, if you're brave enough to answer. The act of stepping outside, barefoot if you can, letting the first rays of sunlight hit your face. It's not just poetic. It's neurological reprogramming. It resets your internal clock, improves sleep cycles, sharpens your focus, balances your hormones. You feel alive, not because you drank caffeine, but because you're finally in sync. And here's the truth. Your body is not broken. Your spirit is not weak. You're simply out of rhythm with how you were designed to live. No man was born to wake up exhausted, drag himself into traffic, force productivity under fluorescent lights, numb the discomfort with endless distraction, and collapse into sleep with a screen in his face. You were built for clarity, for strength, for presence. And all of that begins with one thing: getting back in rhythm with the rising sun. There's a reason ancient cultures revered the dawn. There's a reason every spiritual tradition has a ritual in the early hours. There's a reason monks rise before light. Why Stoics sat with their thoughts before the noise began. Why warriors sharpened their minds before unsheathing their swords. Because in that sacred window before the world awakens, a man can finally hear the signal beyond all the noise. His own calling. That calling doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't beg. It whispers. Soft, steady, like breath in winter air. Wake up. Come back. You were made for more than this. But to hear it, you must rise before the world shouts it down. You must see the sky change color. You must meet your breath before the headlines do. You must let the light hit your skin before a single screen turns on. You do this not just for discipline, but for restoration, for recalibration, to feel whole again. And when you do, something ancient stirs inside of you. A knowing, a remembering, that you are not meant to be a slave to your alarm, to your phone, to your job, to your comfort. You were meant to rise with the sun. Stand tall in stillness. And enter your day as a man who walks with purpose, not panic. So if you're ready, truly ready, to reconnect with the version of yourself that's been buried under years of noise, neglect, and convenience, then you know what to do. Don't just wake up. Rise. Return to what your body has been calling for. Reclaim what your spirit has been missing. And rebuild your life from the hour it was always meant to begin. Subscribe, because this is not a tactic. It's not a strategy. It's a homecoming. And your path begins in the dark, before the sun finds you. 7. Waking early demands discipline in every area of life. Once you begin rising before the sun, something becomes clear. This isn't just a habit. It's a revolution. And like any revolution, it demands sacrifice. Because you can't live a life of chaos and expect to greet the morning with strength. You can't fill your body with garbage, your nights with noise, your mind with stimulation, and then expect to rise with clarity and purpose. The man who consistently wakes at dawn must build a life worthy of that hour. And that's what separates those who flirt with the idea of change from the men who are truly reborn through it. It starts with sleep. Not just the number of hours, but the respect you show it. You start protecting your nights. Not because you're weak, but because you're at war with the self that wants to be entertained to death. You start saying no. No to late night distractions. No to one more episode. No to scrolling until your brain is numb. You go to bed early, not out of obligation, but out of reverence for the man you're becoming in the morning. And this change doesn't stop at sleep. It leaks into everything. You start eating differently, not for image, but for energy. You stop drinking things that ruin your edge. You stop talking to people who drain your presence. You stop consuming content that poisons your mind. Why? Because when you wake before the world, your senses become sharper. You begin to notice things others miss. The way some conversations leave you empty. The way some habits steal your power. The way some choices cost you more than time, they cost you clarity. And clarity becomes sacred. You begin to crave simplicity, not just in schedule, but in thought. You declutter your home. You clean your space. You start moving through life like a warrior monk, measured, alert, centered. You stop rushing. You start noticing. You start designing your day with intention, not stuffing it full, but carving out space for the things that matter. Stillness. Training. Planning. Presence. Because that's what waking early does. It doesn't just give you more hours. It forces you to live in alignment with the man you say you want to be. And that means making choices others won't. It means becoming a little bit extreme. Not for performance, but for peace. Not for validation, but for power. Not to prove anything, but because your old life no longer fits the standard you're willing to accept. This is Stoicism in motion. Not as a philosophy in a book, but as a code etched into your calendar, your rituals, your posture. You stop chasing stimulation and start seeking order. You stop asking, what can I get away with? And start asking, what builds me? And little by little, the world begins to notice. Not because you're louder, but because you're still. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're rooted. This is the quiet strength of the man who owns his morning. He doesn't just change his wake-up time. He changes his entire relationship to life. So if you're ready to do more than rise early, if you're ready to live a life that supports that rise, then let this be your next step. No more patchwork self-help. No more chasing temporary motivation. Just you, the early morning, and a life shaped around what matters. Subscribe, not to add another thing to your to-do list, but to begin building a life so solid, so simple, and so sacred, that waking early becomes the most natural thing in the world. Not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. 1 hour in the morning is worth 3 at night. As you begin to rebuild your life around the early morning, as your sleep, your choices, your environment all begin to shift, you start to notice something else. Something that catches most men off guard. You're doing more by doing less. You're not busier. You're not working longer hours. But suddenly, the things that once felt overwhelming feel simple. What used to take you all day to finish is now done before the sun fully rises. Why? Because in the morning, before the world clutters your mind, you are focused. Sharply, deeply, relentlessly focused. You're not checking messages. You're not distracted by demands. You're not filtering through the residue of yesterday's noise. You're clean, clear, undisturbed. And in that state, an hour becomes powerful. One focused hour, right after waking, before the chaos, can equal 3, 4, even 5 distracted hours at night. Because it's not about how many hours you put in. It's about how alive you are in the hours you choose. This is a truth the Stoics lived by long before neuroscience proved it. Your energy, your focus, your ability to think clearly and act decisively. It all peaks when your mind is rested, your body is aligned, and your world is quiet. And those conditions exist in exactly one place. The early morning. But most men never access this power. They stumble into their day half-conscious, running late, reactive, foggy. Then they stay up late trying to make up for what they lost. working longer, pushing harder, dragging themselves across the finish line. And still, they're behind. Still overwhelmed. Still exhausted. But the man who rises early, the man who starts his day in silence and structure, he moves differently. He doesn't work more. He works better. Because he knows that productivity isn't about effort alone. It's about attention, presence, depth. And those are only available when the world hasn't yet claimed your mind. You begin to realize it's not just about beating the sun. It's about beating the noise. And in a world where everyone is multitasking, rushing, constantly stimulated, focused attention becomes a weapon. When other men are chasing dopamine, you're chasing clarity. When they're buried in distractions, you're in deep work. When they're reacting, you're creating. That's what the early hour gives you. Not more time, but more intensity inside the time you already have. So stop asking how many hours it takes. Start asking how much of you shows up inside those hours. If you want to write the book, build the business, sculpt the body, lead the life, you don't need longer days. You need uninterrupted focus. And the purest, cleanest form of it exists only before the world gets loud. This is not about hustle. It's about intention. And when you stack enough intentional mornings together, you start to realize you no longer need to scramble at night. You go to bed fulfilled, clear, finished, because the real work was done in the silence. If you've been chasing productivity but finding nothing but burnout, it's time to stop adding more and start going deeper. Subscribe, not because you want to do more, but because you're ready to finally do the right things at the right time with your full self. And that only happens in the hour the rest of the world still sleeps. 9. You don't wake early to impress. You wake early to build inner strength. By now, you've realized that waking up early isn't about fitting more into your day. It's about focusing more deeply, living more deliberately, and moving through life with clarity while others are spinning in circles. But here's the truth even fewer men talk about. Eventually, the productivity fades. The novelty wears off. The results stop thrilling you. And that's when you face the real test. Because if you wake up early just to check more boxes, to show off a routine, to post a picture of your morning grind, you will quit. Maybe not today. Maybe not this week. But the moment the motivation dips, the moment no one is watching, the moment life gets hard, you'll fall back into comfort. Because productivity cannot be your purpose. It's too shallow. Too fleeting. It doesn't reach deep enough into the parts of you that need to be transformed. So what, then, keeps you waking up before dawn when there's no applause, no excitement, no momentum? What keeps you rising while others sleep? It's who you become in the process. That's the hidden reason behind all of this. That's the heartbeat of stoicism, of discipline, of inner power. You wake up early not to achieve. You wake up early to train. You're training the part of you that doesn't care how you feel. You're training the part of you that chooses strength over comfort. The part of you that doesn't need validation. That doesn't seek permission. That doesn't negotiate with weakness. This is the man you're building. The one who doesn't need a reason to rise. The one who rises because that's who he is. In a world addicted to shortcuts, dopamine hits, and empty signals of success, you're doing the opposite. You're practicing the ancient art of self-respect. You're cultivating something no one can fake. Internal solidity. This is the moment discipline becomes sacred. Not as punishment, but as purification. Not as restriction, but as refinement. Each morning, you're forging something invisible but undeniable. The quiet, immovable center of a man who has met himself and decided not to betray what he knows he must do. You stop looking for hacks. You stop looking for shortcuts. You stop asking, how can I make this easier? Instead, you ask, What would the strongest version of me do right now? And then you do that. Not because it's fun. Not because it's Instagrammable. But because it's right. That's what changes your life. Not the habit. Not the hour. But the decision to build your life on something deeper than convenience. And in that moment, when you're up before the sun, no lights on, no one around, you feel it. You're not alone. You're not lost. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply standing at the intersection of your old self and your potential. And you are choosing, once again, to become more. Not for the world. Not for your brand. But for your own soul. That's why you wake up early. Subscribe, not to become productive, but to become unchangeable. Because in a world full of noise and speed and performance, your quiet discipline at dawn will become your greatest weapon. And the man you are in that hour is the man you carry into every hour that follows. 10. Don't start with 5 a.m. Start with a reason. By now, you've heard it all. You felt it. The quiet power of waking early. The physiological reset. The sharpened clarity. The reclaimed rhythm. The stillness, the focus, the discipline, the transformation. But here's the truth most miss at the end of all this. You don't need to wake up at 5 a.m. That's right. Because this isn't about a specific hour. This isn't about copying someone else's schedule. It's not about joining the 5 a.m. club, stacking morning routines, or proving you're tough. It's about something far more profound. It's about ownership. What time you wake up doesn't define you. What defines you is whether you've chosen the hour that lets you meet yourself fully before the world does. Some men rise at 5. Some rise at 4. Some rise at 6. The time is irrelevant if your mind is still scattered, your choice is still unintentional, your morning still reactive. What matters is this. Do you own the first hour of your day? Or does the world own it for you? Do you wake up with awareness? Or do you wake up into chaos? Do you set the tone for your day? Or does your day set the tone for you? The Stoics never prescribed a time. They prescribed a principle. Be present. Be sovereign. Be deliberate. Seneca didn't say, wake at 5. He said, let each day be a life. Let it begin with intention, not inertia. With clarity, not confusion. With values, not default settings. Because if the first hour of your day is not yours, then neither is your mind. Neither is your time. Neither is your life. The point is not to copy a routine. The point is to build a life of your own design. So start with your reason. Why are you rising? What are you building? Who are you becoming? Find that first. Then choose the hour that allows you to honor it. Let your wake-up time be a reflection of your values, not your insecurities. Let it reflect your desire to meet the day with strength, not shame. Let it reflect your commitment to presence, not productivity for its own sake. And once you find that rhythm, once you truly own your mornings, you'll stop asking, what's the best time to wake up? You'll start asking, how deeply can I live today? Because that's what this is all about. Not building a perfect morning, but building a life so aligned, so conscious, so internally powerful, that no matter what time your feet hit the floor, you are awake in the deepest sense of the word. So if this message has stirred something in you, if you're ready not just to wake earlier, but to live truer, then don't wait for another Monday. Don't wait for the perfect morning. Decide now that this life is yours, that your morning is sacred, that every day you rise, you do so with the full weight of who you are, and the full courage to become more. Subscribe, not to join a trend, but to return to yourself, because it was never about 5 a.m. It was always about freedom. And that begins the moment you stop waking up by accident. Conclusion: Your mornings reflect your life. What you've just journeyed through isn't about time. It's about awakening. Not about chasing productivity, but about living with intention. Not about fitting into someone else's schedule, but about breaking out of a life of reactivity, noise, and hesitation. Waking up early, at 5 a.m. or any hour you choose, is not the victory. It is the altar on which you place your first vow of the day. The vow that says you will not live in delay, distraction, or submission to the needs of others. You will live by principle. The truth is this: you don't rise early to show off. You rise early to forge your mind, your spirit, your focus. You don't need an audience. Because true strength does not need to be seen, it needs to be lived. And when you step into the morning, alone, in silence, with discipline, for no other reason than because it's the right thing to do, your life begins to shift. Little by little. Not loudly. Not quickly. But undeniably. Just like the sun rises, without permission, without apology. Because if you can own your morning, you can own your day. And if you can own your day, you can own your life. You don't need to start with 5 a.m. Start with a decision. Start with a reason. Start with the awareness that your life deserves a strong beginning every single day. Don't rise early just to be busy. Rise early to become clear, grounded, and unshakable. Because real freedom doesn't come from having more hours. It comes from using even 1 hour fully, purposefully, and without betraying yourself. And all of that begins the moment you sit up in bed, without hesitation.